It's such a beautiful, lovely day. I thought I would spend a little time and talk about a subject that I don't talk often about. Now, when I use terms like Mennonite and finances, I want you to know that that is not stereotypical. I am not saying that everyone is this way. Every single person who watches my videos comes from a different background. They come from a different way of life, and they come from a different way of doing things. Just because that I'm going to share with you my background, maybe you had a similar background, but your story is totally different, doesn't mean that you're right or I'm right, or you're wrong and I'm wrong. You know, that's the story of our life. Everybody has different experiences in life, and I wanted to share with you a little bit of mine. The topic today we're going to talk about is my Mennonite finances. And I know there's a lot of channels that talk about finances, and really I don't talk about that on my channel. But I do use buzzwords. And what are the buzzwords that I use? I like to use the word low income. I'll use the word poor. I'll use the word self-sustainable. I'll use words, different key words. And the reason why I use those words are they are strategic words that I use to share with people what my videos are about. I will go and I will share things like a set income and all kinds of things like that. And I want to tell you a little bit about me and a little bit about why I say those words and a little bit about my finances. Shh, there's certain things you don't talk about. Let's see, is it religion, your age, and finances? And I think I've done all of them, right? I'm going to cover pretty much all of them in this video. So this may be a video that people will say you shouldn't make. I've always gone against the stereotypes, and I've always gone against the grain. I've always been that way. If somebody says I can't do something, I like to see if I can do it. That's just how I am. And I thought this would be fascinating because there's a lot of people who watch my videos who are totally different background as me, and they're fascinated about when I talk about Mennonite living. Now, it's been a long time since I mentioned about Mennonite living. But I thought today would be a good topic because it has to do with my life and with my videos. So let's get started in all of that. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Now, I don't like repeating myself, but when you have so many videos and you have 5 years of videos, it's kind of hard not to repeat yourself. And it seems like every time I don't repeat myself, I have new people coming on my channel. They're totally lost, and they said they don't understand what I'm talking about. So let me give a 60-second summary of my life. How about that? At age 17, I got married. I was born and raised with the traditional Mennonite values. I'm not going to go into all of that. You can research that. It's really easy to find what that means. But I grew up very conservative. Now, my parents grew up very plain. They wore the bonnets. My mother wore the dresses. My dad wore the black rim hats and the black clothing. By the time they adopted me, later on in their life, they were no longer Mennonites in that sense of the word, and they belonged to a more charismatic church. But yet they still held, remember, they still held a lot of the Mennonite traditions. And a lot of the traditions were the woman was to stay at home, and the husband was the head of the home. Now, this isn't just for Mennonite belief. This is for a lot of fundamentalists. In fact, I didn't even know what that word meant until I was in my 40s. This was just my way of life. And of course, I'm probably not even saying it right. Fundamentalist. Hey, it is what it is. And so that is the way a lot of people were raised. And I was raised that way. And a lot of the Mennonites were raised that way. Now, of course, there are Mennonites that aren't raised that way, but everybody has a different way of doing things. And the traditional old-fashioned way was the women were at home. They stayed at home their whole life. They stayed at home, not just when they were young. They got married, had children, stayed at home. The husband was the head of the house. And what did that mean? Well, he worked away. He came home and he brought the money and the paycheck. And he was in charge of the finances. That was the traditional way. That's how it was. Now, in my mother's case, my mother was the one who handled money better than my father. And my mother handled all the money. But my mom would stay at home. My mom didn't work away, and my dad brought in the paycheck. But when I got married into a similar family, except for it was a little bit of a more strict dynamics. Now, my husband grew up in the plain Mennonite background. His mother wore the covering and wore the cape dresses, and once again, they somewhat left the Mennonite church. But in their circumstances, the woman But in their circumstances, the man was the head of the home and the man was in charge totally of the finances. And that's how I grew up. When I say grew up, I got married at age 17. The biggest part of my growing up was a married woman. I was a very young woman, and by the age of 19, I had 3 children. And I was into the role of being a stay-at-home mom. My husband, and that's the husband I still have, I only ever had one husband, he is the head of the home, and he still is. At the time when we were first married, and up until I had YouTube, my husband was the only way we earned a living. He brought home the money, and he would hand out a certain amount of money to me, and that was my money. And that was my money I could use to buy groceries and things like that. Now, this was very traditional. This is how I was brought up to a certain point, but this is how I wanted to live my life. This wasn't any kind of, abuse way. This was how we wanted it. This is how I understood life to be. And he always went with me. We always went for the grocery store together. If I needed some money, I would ask him for some money, and he would give me some money. Now, a lot of you are looking down and go, well, I would never be married to somebody like that. Well, that is because that's not what you were accustomed to. A lot of people would be like, oh, that ain't happening in my home. And that is the way you were accustomed to it. I grew up in a very sheltered home, and this is how I love my life. When I started YouTube, of course, everything changed for me because I had to have things in my name. That was the first time. I didn't have cars in my name. I didn't have homes in my name. I didn't have bank accounts in my name. I was nobody. In fact, nobody would have even known who I was. I had no record of my existence when it came to finances. But when I started making a YouTube channel, it was in my name. And then the finances had to be in my name. And so I opened up my own bank account in my name, and then I have my husband's name as well on it. My life radically changed, radically, but some things still are the same. My husband is the head of our home. My husband is in charge of the finances. And what does that mean? I am glad you're wondering. So what happens is, if I go away, he holds the money and he gives me whatever money I need. Of course, things are a little different right now because I earn the income, and so if I need something for a video or something like that, he will give it to me, and I have more money now per se than what I did when I was a young Mennonite wife. Simply because with making videos and doing things, sometimes there's things I need to have in order to make videos. But he's in charge of the money. When I get paid, we have certain amount of money goes to certain places, and he gets some cash out. He holds that cash and he goes with me everywhere I go. My husband has always gone with me everywhere I go. That is the relationship of our marriage. My husband and my children, I have 3 children. All 3 of my children are my very best friends. My children are only a year apart, and my children are all married and grown up, and my oldest daughter has two little girls. And they're all married, and we just have a very close-knit family because that is how we grew up. I grew up with my children. And so a lot of times I will say in my videos, low income, and I will say things like this. But I want to make another point very clear. When I say low income, those are buzzwords, and those are words of how I live. Now, I want to explain something to you. My husband and I are big savers. And so growing up in the fundamental Mennonite church, that is what we were taught. You're taught to save your money and not spend it. Mennonites will go out of their way to find something free because that is how they were raised. The Mennonites in my community and where I'm from, how I was raised. It doesn't mean every family was that way, but in general, Mennonites don't waste money and they don't spend money. And so while we live in a home that appears to look maybe as a home that certain families wouldn't live in, we live this way for a reason. I have stressed that in many videos. We wouldn't have to live in a home that has issues with it. We choose to live this way because we choose not to spend our money on things of that nature, of having new things. That's just the way I am, And that's the way my husband is. A lot of people wonder about my husband because he's more private, but he watches all of my videos and he really approves of my videos. So I don't ever do anything against my husband. He loves it, but he's just not as open on camera as I am. And that's just a personality. You know, that's not his personality, but he's even more of a saver than me. In fact, he would save even more money than I do. And so when you see me and I talk about low income living, you also have to understand that when I started my Homestead channel, my income was extremely low. We lived below poverty level when I started my channel, but my channel has grown and I have become more successful. And so I'm not below poverty level anymore, but yet I live a life in a way that saves a lot of money because I'm not a spender. And I want to explain some reasons why to you. You know, why do I talk about recanning food and why do I do all this? That's how I am. I was always that way. If I was a millionaire, I would be that way. I wouldn't spend money. So some things we do because of nature and how we were raised. My parents were wealthy, but my parents didn't spend money. Now, when my mom went into the home, she was in the home for, I think, 12 years. And so that took a lot of money to be in the home that long. But my parents didn't spend money frivolously in the day that they were living in. And even today's standards, they would really be savers, you know. And I believe in being debt-free. We don't have debt. And so we save our money for in times of need. But I want to explain something to you. My husband is 56 years old and I'm 52. We had to save some money for retirement because someday YouTube may not be here. Someday the other forms that I have of income may not be here. And at our age, we have to have retirement. We have to have some form of retirement. And that is why we save so much money. And so I continue to share on my channel ways that you can save money and all kinds of ways you can think outside the box. Now, my channel isn't just for low income people. In fact, I have very wealthy people that watch my videos. Very wealthy people. But they like my channel because they like to save money. And they like thinking outside the box. And they simply just like seeing my life. They enjoy me. They like me. And they like my family and they like my husband and they just enjoy my channel. But my channel isn't just for people who are on low income. In our lives, we go through a lot of stages, and there's some times in our lives where we go through extreme financial situations, and we have. My husband and I have been through financial situations. One time majorly, it was a major financial situation. We were in the real estate market. We were doing really good, and all of a sudden in 2007, the real estate market collapsed. And I have many videos on that, and I'll share one right here. And it was no fault of our own, really. We were just making a living flipping houses. We would buy them, fix them up, or pay somebody to fix them up, and then we would resell them. And then we had great times where we were doing really well. My husband bought a window cleaning business, and for many years, that whole window cleaning business did extremely well. And then my husband retired on it because we felt like, why does he need to keep working like that? Working his life away for what? Well, what for? So I rather had my husband retired and stay at home and we live a simpler life, but to have my husband with me. There was something my father-in-law said that really instilled in me such a value, and this is what he said. My father-in-law worked hard his whole life. He was a workaholic, and so was my husband when we were first married, and up and through our marriage, up until YouTube about a year and a half ago, really. He worked his whole life away. And my father-in-law said about maybe a month before he died, he said, I can't believe I got so old so soon. And you know, I really thought about that, and I think about that today. He got so old so soon. When he was on his deathbed, he was not thinking about how he wished he would have worked harder another more month or another more year. He was regretting the time that he was gone. I believe he was regretting the time that he was just working and not around. And so I'd rather have my husband home. And we can easily have my husband home with the way we live. and I can still save money for retirement someday, or for a day when there is no YouTube, or a day when there is no filmmaking, you know, if I couldn't make any films, you know. And so we do save up for all that. We had a bad situation happen last year with that big hospital bill, and we paid a good part of that hospital bill off ourselves. We paid over half of it. Now, they did give us a discount because we were paying for it, and we have a little bit yet to go, but we're going to have that paid off within a year, only because we had money saved, and that we are saving everything we have to, you know, remedy that situation. And so we don't live paycheck to paycheck. And so I want people to understand that, you know, even though my life is not affluent, it doesn't mean that we don't have money saved back. Why do I share these things? Because I think that people are really interested in other ways of living. And I think that I learned from other people, you know, Sensible Living with Money Mom. She is a friend of mine, and her channel, she talks every day about different things about saving money. Does every single video of hers affect me? Do I learn? No, not in every single video of them, but through the years, I've learned a lot from her. What I shared with you today, will it help you in any way? Maybe not, but yet you can understand the person, the person behind the camera. And so the finances and the Mennonite way, and that is just how we were born and raised. And it is fascinating to people who never lived that way, who have no clue, you know, what is it like? In every situation, there are different family dynamics. In every situation, there are families that do take it too far. There are families where when the man is the head of the home, he takes it too far and is very degrading to his wife, or he, you know, is very limited and he doesn't, you know, he's not kind to her, and he's very a dictatorship about it. But I grew up in a different atmosphere. I grew up in a way that my husband's very loving. My father-in-law was very loving to my mother-in-law. We grew up in very loving homes, and whenever my mother-in-law needed something, she could get it. It's just he was in charge of it. He was in charge of writing the checks out, and to this day, I've only ever wrote a check out one time. And I still get nervous in doing some things that have to do with finances, but I learned a lot. And through all of that, even when I was a young Mennonite wife, I knew what our finances were. My husband always shared them with us. Like, I knew how much money we were bringing in, and I knew how much money we were making. I knew how much things cost and the expense of it. It's just he handled all that simply because that is how he was raised. His daddy taught him how to do that. And in some families nowadays, you know, it's the opposite, where the man isn't very good with money and the wife has to step in and she has to, you know, take over the finances. But I'm just talking about me and my family, and I was just talking about how we were born and raised, and it was a biblical way. Like, we were raised under the biblical headship, you know, Christ was the head, and then it was your husband, and then it was the wife, and then it was the children. My girls don't work away. My oldest daughter worked away a little bit at a kennel before she was married, but my girls don't work away because simply they married husbands that believe in the value of them being at home, and financially they can be at home. But if it ever got to the point financially, you know, they would have to work, well, then I guess they would have to work. But we were just raised at being at home and staying at home. When my husband came home and retired, he does have an income, and that goes towards our retirement, and he does work on an income at home, but that's totally a retirement income. Mine pays all the expenses, you know, the electric and all of the things like that, which is such a blessing to me. I never dreamed that I would be making a paycheck, but I work from home. Would I ever go out and get a job? And a lot of people often ask that because they're fascinated. And no, I will never go out and get a job outside the home unless I absolutely had to. If that happened, my husband would work away simply because he wouldn't want me outside of the home, you know, working away. That's simply not something that is considered in our unit as being something acceptable. And that's just the way it is. That's just how we were. And so it's fascinating because everybody does things different. There is no right way, there is no wrong way. And we need to embrace the different things that people do. And women work away and have beautiful careers. My sisters all work away from home. They wouldn't want to be stay-at-home moms. That's just not what they want it to be. They wanted to have careers, and they have beautiful careers, and they do amazing work. It's what you want to do and what you feel in your heart. And so I thought I would share this with all of you, and in an understanding that, you know, in life there's so much criticalness. Everybody's so critical. And you know, you don't need to be that way. We need to embrace the differences. And the world is made up of different people, different ways of doing things. Because it is my standard and because it's my conviction doesn't mean it's yours. And it doesn't have to be your conviction. My way is not better than your way. All of our ways together make a melting pot of a wonderful, wonderful world that we live in. But I thought I would share with you a little bit of the traditional Mennonite values and share with you a little bit about where I'm coming from and how I live my life today.